If you watch any Mario Kart Double Dash time trial world record, you can tell it's something that requires an immense amount of skill. You can see players pull off 1 in 40 tricks, drive entire laps sideways, and do multiple consecutive frame-perfect inputs. Obviously, to get any record would require an extremely optimized and skilled run. But there are 5 world records which I personally think are more optimized and harder to beat than any other record in the game. In this video, I'll be going over what makes these runs so impressive and what makes them so difficult to beat. Now, before I get into the ranking, I'd like to explain how I decided what the hardest records to beat are. I used multiple factors to decide my ranking. How optimized the run is, of course, how long the record has lasted, and how the competition on the track fares compared to the record. I also asked multiple high-level Mario Kart Double Dash speedrunners their thoughts on the hardest records, and used some of their input on this video, so massive thanks to them. Additionally, keep in mind that no record is truly unbeatable. New strategies are still being discovered to this day, and there are always tiny optimizations that can still be done. However, these runs are still either extremely difficult to beat or unlikely to go down soon. With that out of the way, let's get into the countdown. Starting off this list, we have Matilda's Rainbow Road Fast Lap. Rainbow Road has always been a bit of an enigma for Mario Kart Double Dash speedrunners. Normally, this game is all about squeezing out as many mini-turbos as you can to go as fast as possible. Rainbow Road, however, is quite different. There are still mini-turbos to be done, yes, but many of the sections require little to no mini-turbos, such as the zipper spiral, the ending zipper section, and the finishing spiral. This fact, combined with the track being the longest in the game, makes this easily the least mini-turbo dense track in the entire game. There are also many techniques and strategies that are unique to this track, making it so that no matter how good you are at the game, you'll still have to learn a lot to succeed here. For these reasons, many top-level MKD speedrunners hate playing this track. There is one glaring exception, though. Matilda was only ranked 17th in the world when she set her first world record on Rainbow Road, getting a course time of 2:54.180. It would be nearly a year before she improved the track again, and when she did, she would drop the course time by a couple frames and also get her first ever lap record, beating Optimistic Emo's former record by nearly 0.1 with a time of 57.007. With it being under a frame away, the question on everyone's mind was, when will the sub 57 happen? Well, despite her playing the track a few more times over the coming years, setting multiple improvements on the 3-lap time, she was never quite able to beat the flap. However, in late July, she'd return to the track again and grind the flap some, and on the 27th, she'd post that Rainbow Road Fast Lap was over. 56.894. The lap starts off by releasing a mini-turbo right on the finish line to start the lap at top speed. After going off this ramp, there's a section where you have to push out a few mini-turbos, which is child's play compared to what comes next. The first mushroom is used around the first of these 2 hairpin turns. In order to go as tight as you can around this turn, you must do a technique known as R-Tech. This involves mashing one of the 2 drift buttons in a very distinct pattern. 3 frames on the drift button, 8 frames off. This is obviously quite difficult to get perfectly. Luckily, it doesn't necessarily have to be exact to the frame to be well executed, but it can still be very difficult to get these inputs down consistently. The second hairpin is completely different. You have to hit this railing before the turn itself in hopes that it optimally bounces you around the turn perfectly. This is definitely not the most difficult thing, especially compared to the previous hairpin, but can still be annoying and inconsistent. After these hairpins comes a ramp that drops you onto a straight section with 2 large boost panels. The first one is fine, but the second one gets tricky. If you go off the boost panels into the air, you'll trudge through the air pretty slowly, so it's faster to go off the side of the ramp here. While going off the side, you have to do what's known as a mid-air mini-turbo. This is exactly what it sounds like, charging a mini-turbo while in the air to get a quick additional speed boost. This specific mid-air MT is widely considered of, if not the hardest mid-air mini-turbos in the game, since you have to have precise timing going off the side of the track charging the mini-turbo. It's a bit hard to see in the video, but Matilda does pull this off, and it gets a small speed boost in the air from it. Although it doesn't save a ton of time, it's definitely worth it, especially at the world record level. Next up is the zipper spiral. Optimally, you want to take this as tight as possible while still hitting as many zippers as you can. There is a brief gap where you can't optimally hit a zipper, so runners do what's known as the spiral MT, which is a simple mini-turbo. This can be a bit difficult, but with practice it becomes fairly consistent. Afterwards, the track is a bit easier, a simple straightaway before an elevator that gives you a few seconds of rest. When landing from the elevator, there's another straightaway, this time with some zippers. All you have to do is adjust the joystick a bit to make it through this part. The track ends off with a spiral where your second mushroom is used, and here's the catch, you have to use R-Tech for this. Not only that, you have to do set R-Tech for about a second and a half. That's a second and a half of multiple near frame perfect inputs. Considering how little variance exists in most parts of the track, this almost single-handedly will decide how fast or slow your run is. Worst of all, it's at the very end of the track, so even if you're having a great run so far, there's no guarantee it'll stay that way. Luckily for Matilda, she was able to get through this cleanly and finish the first sub 57 lap in Rainbow Road history. Matilda said that it might be one of the greatest MKD runs ever, and it being on this list further proves that. However, it's only at number 5 for 2 reasons. For one, after rewatching it, Matilda said there were a few minor mistakes that could be improved. Secondly, as of the time of this video, this run is only a couple months old, so it doesn't quite hold up to the record duration requirement. However, Matilda does have a lead of over 0.2 on Emo's second place lap, and over 0.3 ahead of third place. It's unlikely we'll see anyone besides Matilda beat this record anytime soon. Coming in at number 4, we have Optimistic Emo's Mushroom City 3 lap. We just talked about Rainbow Road, one of the least mini-turbo heavy tracks in the game. Well, now we move on to Mushroom City, one of the most mini-turbo heavy tracks. This track is almost entirely straight sections, meaning you'll have to constantly crank out MTs to keep your kart moving as fast as possible. Considering this track is over a minute and a half long, repeatedly having to do the same inputs can be extremely tiring and can cause some pretty gnarly hand pain. This has detracted a lot of top-level players from playing this track, and for a while this was considered one of the game's weakest records. However, 7 straight records later, Optimistic Emo has lowered this record from a 133.8 to a 133.5, earning himself a spot on this list. This is an inconsistent track for multiple reasons. The main one is these angled corners. You have to take them tightly, but not hit the wall at any point to avoid being bumped backwards away from the turn. There's also these slightly elevated sidewalks throughout the track, which you have to go up and down from multiple times. These can cause small little bounces which can end up completely killing a run. There's one more annoyance on this track: cycles. Throughout the track there are multiple cars, trucks, and buses surrounding the course. It is a city after all. In order to optimally complete the track, you have to avoid these vehicles. On lap 1, there's luckily none in your way, and on lap 2, the coast is mostly clear until the end of the lap, where you have to weave between this truck and an out-of-bounds zone. However, most skilled players can do this pretty consistently. The real problem comes in on lap 3. Firstly, this yellow car acts as a pace lock. Basically, if Optimistic Emo were even as much as 0.1 faster here, he would have hit this car and killed the run. Basically, to dodge this car, you'd either have to have an insane pace or be slow enough to avoid it, making this record very difficult to improve without the right pace. To end this run, you have to tightrope between a truck and the out-of-bounds area again, but luckily Emo pulls this off, finishing with a time of 133.580, cutting 0.1 off of the previous record. It's now been 4.5 years, and this record remains untouched and sits as Emo's only remaining world record. There are no runs within 0.1 of this, but there are 3 runs within 0.2. However, all of these runs are from January 2022 or earlier, and Emo himself hasn't played since April 2021, meaning that it seems like no one is going to take this record down anytime soon. At number 3, we have Goomba's Yoshi Circuit Flap. Compared to the previous 2 tracks, Yoshi Circuit is pretty simple. It's one of the most technical tracks in the game, and doesn't really have any gimmicky parts like many other tracks. Rather, it's simply a matter of getting perfect mini-turbos and lines. This is accentuated in the Fast Lap, where even the tiniest mistakes can be a run killer. Due to the immense optimization runs on this track require, the Fastest Lap records can end up lasting for multiple years simply due to them being difficult to beat. Carlson held the record here for over 3 years before Goomba beat it by 2 milliseconds in 2017. He lowered the record multiple times afterwards, getting it closer and closer to the sub-32 mark. He finally got it on June 16, 2018, before getting an 82 millisecond cut just a few minutes later. This was the largest cut on the lap record here since 2004, and put him miles ahead of anyone here. Carlson himself said that this run was one of the most impressive records in all the Mario Kart games. Since this run, 2 other runners have gone sub-31. Optimistic Emo, who did so in 2019, and Matilda, who pulled it off in 2022. However, Goomba's run still seems nearly unbeatable. At over 2,300 days, it's the longest lasting of any of the currently standing records, and that counter will only continue to go up until someone finally takes this down. At number 2 is Goomba's Luigi Circuit 3 lap. If you look at Luigi Circuit, you may think that it's an extremely easy track. However, the truth is that top-level speedrunners actually hate this track. Why? Well, it's one of the shortest tracks in the game. It is extremely difficult to optimize, and that's only furthered as you get better and better and there's less time saved to be found. Firstly, at the top level, there's an extra mini-turbo done before this big U-turn. This mini-turbo is quite difficult to effectively save time with, and therefore makes for quite the challenge, especially doing it 3 times in one run. But that's not all this track has in store, because right after this extra MT is the U-turn itself. In order to optimally do this U-turn, you have to complete 5 quick and evenly spaced mini-turbos. There are 2 ways to do this: sideways boosting, which is, well, going sideways from a mini-turbo boost, or fancy A-Tech, which is releasing the A button a bit before releasing the drift button to have the mini-turbo send you sideways a bit more. To optimally complete the U-turn, you have to do one of these techniques, or some combination of the 2, while trying to remain just pixels away from the sand that'll instantly kill your run if hit. The rest of the track is pretty simple in comparison, so as long as you can complete 3 clean U-turns, completing a run is no problem. The real problem is optimizing it. Andrew Math had a pretty dominant reign here starting at the end of 2013, taking the record down from a 114.5 to 114.390 in July 2016. This record lasted over 500 days until Goomba got his first record here by just 2 milliseconds in December 2017, before cutting a few more milliseconds off later that day. He would get the first .2 with a .289 in May of 2018. His next cut would be massive though, taking the track all the way down to a 114.144. It's believed that a 113 could be possible here, but that's looking less likely as time goes on. Over 5 years after this record, only 2 other runners have even gone below a .4, and Andrew Math is the only one to go below a .3, but he's still a good 150 milliseconds behind. With Goomba now seemingly retired from Double Dash, it seems as if this record has no real competition. But there is one run I would consider even harder to beat. Dry Dry Desert is one of the most unique tracks in the game. There are 4 different colors of sand throughout the track, each with different properties. There's white sand, which acts as normal road, yellow sand, which causes a slight reduction in speed, dark yellow sand, which is extremely harsh off-road that is impossible to even drift through, and orange sand that acts as out of bounds. This creates an interesting dynamic that really isn't present on any other tracks, where you're constantly switching between different speeds and road types. Sometimes it's faster to just be at max speed and stay on the main road, while other times you sacrifice your speed to take a tighter line. The 2 mushrooms you get are used on the heavy off-road to cut off some portions of the track as shortcuts. The first of these is interesting. It's one of the few places in this game where it's actually optimal to get airtime. Ideally, you go off the slope to get as much airtime as you can to maximize the amount of off-road you can go through. The second mushroom is used on this last turn, and this is the hardest of the 2. You have to take a unique line through the hill section, a line that you wouldn't normally take during 3-lap attempts, so you don't have many opportunities to practice it. You have to take this without getting even the tiniest pocket of air in order to avoid any time loss. The mushroom itself is a bit weird too, as you can't take it too tight or you'll catch them with the run-killing thick off-road. So you have to take the line just tight enough to where you'll cut off the right amount of off-road, but not too much. Goomba and Optimistic Emo have had quite the record battle here in recent years. Goomba got his first record in March of 2017 with a time of 27.560, which lasted over a year and a half before Emo went on a 4-record run in just a week to take the record down to .504, which only lasted a couple days before Goomba got a .435. Emo reclaimed the record in January 2019 with a time of 27.413. Emo always said a .3 was possible, but it'd been nearly 1,500 days before Goomba pulled it off with a time of 27.393. And then just a couple days later, he'd take the record down to a 27.334. This was a massive cut considering this record was already quite optimized, and in my opinion, this run may be as close to a perfect run we see in this game. Every tiny thing is done with near perfection. Being 80 milliseconds ahead of second place and 150 milliseconds ahead of third, Goomba's lap is in a league of its own, and it completely deserves to be. It's been over a year and a half since it was set, and I think it could be multiple years before anyone beats it back. And that's what makes it Mario Kart Double Dash's most unbeatable world record. Thanks for watching.